surrender fully to that consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Text 50. Buddhi yukto jahatiha ubhe sukrita dushkrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karma sukoshalam. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. 51. Karmajam buddhi yuktahi palam tyaktva manishinaha janma bandha vinirmukta param gachanti anamayam. The wise, engaged in devotional service, take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of actions in the material world. In this way, they can attain that state beyond all miseries. 52. Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyatira arishyati tada gantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Text 53. Shruti vipratipanate yada stasyat. Hold on. Shruti vipratipanate yada stasyati nischala samadhavachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Text 54. Arjuna uvacha stita pragyasya kabasha samadhistasya keshava stita di kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. Arjuna said, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk? Text 55. Shri Bhagavan uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atman yevatmana tushta shtita pragyastatocyate. The Blessed Lord said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Jai. We'll go back to text 45. We'll read the translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Read by Bhakti Avatar Prabhu. Jai.
To all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Purport. All material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy where, in the beginning, there is Brahma Jignasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and to get rid of material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Kanda chapter, are finished, Then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas, as the Bhagavad Gita is part of the fifth Veda, namely the Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. As long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress, cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna.
If Maharaj would like to make a comment, feel free to do so at any time. Hare Krishna. So we're hearing from the second chapter, contents of the Gita summarized. Does anybody know what the third chapter is entitled? Anybody shout it? Karma Yoga. So here Krishna is instructing Arjuna to not be attached to all the results of work. And just reading through this the first time, we were just reading through it real quick, and it just strikes me where it sounds so amazing. It makes so much sense that you're able to act in the world and not be attached to the results. So in the first text of the third chapter, Arjuna, he's bewildered because he's saying, okay, you're telling me to renounce the fruits of work and not pertain to that, but at the same time engage in this warfare. So I'm confused by these equivocal instructions. So this verse that we just read is actually significant because it's talking about three modes of material nature. In the first sentence of the purport, Prabhupada gave is very nice. It says, all material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. And then they are meant for fruits of results, which cause bondage in the material world. So for doing these actions, when we're associating with the modes of material nature, for fruits of results, this is what creates bondage in the material world. We're always acting in some way because we want some kind of result. We want something out of it for ourselves. I'm just thinking about it now in the past. I remember having friends and they're going out to do something, or they ask you to do something, or you need help from your friends or something. And commonly, it's like, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? And it might not be so gross, like, what are you going to do for me to equal the balance? But you're always computing in your mind, if I do this situation, if I do this act, how will it be more favorable for me? How will it be more distressful for me? So we're going through life constantly weighing this in our mind. And this is navigating through life on this mental platform. The mind is just using the senses to navigate through the world, and the mind is the processing unit to accept and reject whatever's favorable, what we think is proper. And I'm skipping ahead, but the last text that we just read, it was really nice. Krishna says in text 55, the Blessed Lord said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So this is very significant. He says, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from mental concoction, meaning whatever that we're doing to gratify our senses, to enjoy our senses in this material world, it's merely coming from the mental platform. Matter can't actually give us pleasure. So these things are static, they don't move, they're lifeless. But then our senses come in contact with them, and then our mind deciphers it, whether it's pleasurable or distressful. And this goes for everything. So anything that's actually affecting us, afflicting us, everything in the material world that we're averse to or attracted to, it has the same principle. We're interacting with this field, and the field has different senses to, extend my sensory output out and feel and perceive things, and we become disentangled, or we become entangled in this conception, and we become confused. So this actually creates all of our suffering, all of our anxiety, all of our problems. I was reading in the Bhagavatam recently about Jada Bharat. So Jada Bharat, in his previous life, well, 2 lives back, he was a great king, very saintly king, Rajarishi, and he retired in a timely way and took to full devotional service, just fully engaged in worshiping and meditating on the Lord. I think everybody's probably heard this whole pastime. Ananda says he hasn't, so maybe we'll cover it more. He's meditating in full worship, fully dedicating his whole life. He retired from his family. He has so many loved ones. He has all the opulences you could imagine. Everything that we've worked so hard in our life to achieve and gain, he already had. He renounced all these things, gave it up, didn't even want it, because he realized life has a goal to understand my connection to God and be free from these trigunya, these three modes of material nature. And he went out to the forest, and he was fully immersed in his bhajan. And then, what did he see? He saw a deer, not just any kind of deer. What kind of deer? A pregnant deer. So he was sitting near the river doing his bhajan, and he saw a pregnant deer. What happened to the pregnant deer? It got spooked by a tiger, by a lion. And then yes, he got spooked. She got spooked, and she prematurely gave birth to this deer. Now I remember in that purport, Srila Prabhupada was actually mentioning about women in general, that when they're pregnant, they should really be taken care of nicely and not put into stressful situations, for anything like this can really have severe consequences. And this was happening with this deer. So the deer got spooked by the lion and went to jump, and what happened? A baby fell out into the river. So here is Bharat Maharaj. He's engaged in his meditation, and he sees a deer floating down the river. And what does he do? He saves the deer. He rescues the deer, and he pulls the deer out, and he sees the deer sitting in front of him. So cute, so innocent, nothing to do, completely helpless in life. It's going to die, whether he leaves it in the river or if he just leaves it on the ground, it will die either way. So he says, okay, God must have arranged this for me. This deer is here, and it's come to me for shelter. I can't refuse it. This sounds very nice, right? We see some animal that's hurt, broken wing, broken claw. We take them in, we nurse them, we want to help them. So Jada Bharat took this deer, and he raised this deer. This deer became older. It was able to walk around and do things, but all it knew is its whole family was Jada Bharat. All this deer knew was Jada Bharat. So Jada Bharat was taking care of this deer. And Jada Bharat, he was still engaged in his meditation, his worship. And he'd be there meditating, doing his meditation, and the deer would be sitting there poking around, doing all sorts of childish things. So what would Jada Bharat do? What do you naturally do when you care for something? You give it your attention. From your attention, you develop attachment. This is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Dhyayato, what's the word for dhyayato? What does this mean? Meditate, focus. We should all focus on what we're doing and here. So he develops this attachment for this deer. He's engaged in his meditation, and his meditation would break. He hears a noise over there, so he has to stop and look. And Prabhupada was pointing out in the purport that this was the sign of the demise of his devotional practices, because if we have these material contaminations, how long can we actually, how long can I sit and chant japa before I start thinking of so many things that I have to do? I was hearing a lecture recently, and they were, I don't think they were talking to like brahmacharis or people living in the temple, but devotees, and the point was being made that you have a big shopping list to do. Like Janmashtami is coming up, lots of things going on. We have to make all these preparations. And for some reason, when we try to sit down and chant japa and focus on the Lord's holy names, then this is the best time to do the shopping list and all these plans, because our mind wants to think of anything but just focusing on the holy name. It wants to get out of that and think of so many other things. So here was Jada Bharat. He was fully absorbed in his meditation, nearing perfection of life, and he developed this attachment for the deer, which distracted him from his practices. And this went on further. He developed more and more attachment, where he'd be doing a sacrifice where everything needs to be pure and uncontaminated, and the deer would come up and start touching everything, polluting the whole sacrifice. So this was the sign of downfall. And one day the deer went missing. So he became distraught. He was walking around like a madman, speaking all sorts of crazy philosophies, saying that here's the deer's footprints on the earth. The deer's walking and purifying the earth by his presence, and so many different things, just seeing it crazy. So it's showing that when we become attached to things, we justify it in our mind to make sense of why it actually takes such a significant role in our life. Anything we can do, we can justify it. There's plenty of people who are gangsters, drug smugglers, murderers, all sorts of things. And if you ask them if they were doing the wrong thing, they have some kind of justification in their demeanor of why they were actually doing something beneficial. So everybody has this going on. This is why we need to hear from the Shastra, what gives us absolute truth. Otherwise, we'll always try to justify our position. I can't quite chant 16 rounds. I think 2 is good. It's me, I can't focus. That's good, right? No, we follow the process as it was given, and then we have a proper standard to rise up to. And if we're not at that standard, then we have our sights set. This is the standard, and this is where I'd like to be, and I'm not actually at that standard. So Jada Bharat, due to his attraction to this deer, he lost sight of that standard, and he was falling, and he went seeking after this deer when it was lost. And as he was seeking for the deer, I believe it became dark out, and it was struggle to see, and he slipped and he fell and he died. He gave up his body while he was thinking of this deer. So naturally, in his next birth, he took the birth of a deer. Does anybody know the Bhagavad Gita shloka that corroborates this? That's not named Ananda? Do you know the number? I think it's 85, 86. Krishna says that in 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajyat yante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kanteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So, Jada Bharat attained this birth without fail, the birth of a deer. But he was fortunate because when he took this birth of a deer, what happened? He remembered what? He remembered his previous life. He remembered how he was actually engaged in worship. He gave up his kingdom. He gave up his family. He gave up everything to dedicate his life towards this Brahma Jigyasa, understanding the absolute truth. He gave up everything to understand the absolute truth, to dedicate his life to God, to Krishna. And as soon as he was able to go, he left his mother deer and went right back to the same place where he was doing his bhajan, which I believe is the place where the Shalagam Shilas come from. This is what's mentioned in the shlokas. in the Bhagavatam. It's a very nice place. So he went back there, and he was just hanging around the sages there and waiting to give up his life. And when he gave up his life in that deer body, he came back in the body of Jada Bharat. Does anybody know what the word Jada means? Dull. Jada Bharat, he acted very dull. He acted like a dumb person, somebody who couldn't follow instructions. He couldn't do anything right because he remembered his previous 2 lives, and he says, I'm not messing around with anything. I'm getting out of here. His family, everybody that is around me, they're trying to teach me certain ways to do things. I'm not doing it. And I mean, he was born in a Brahmana family. His father's trying to teach him Brahminical standards, how to chant the Gayatri and do all these nice things. Imagine now, from the births that we took and all the things that we did leading up to Krishna consciousness, how our life would be different if we actually had parents that were teaching us all the things that we've been learning recently and more so. And you grew up with that. It would make a drastic difference. But here's Jada Bharat refusing all this because he's transcendental. He's above all the rules and regulations. So we can praise and pray and glorify him, but we can't necessarily follow in his footsteps. We have to understand where we're at, that we're conditioned souls in this Kali Yuga, and we need these different rules and regulations to help us come up to a higher platform. But Jada Bharat was well beyond these 3 modes of material nature in this mental concoction of sense gratification. I'm just thinking of to really showcase this, how our idea of enjoyment is coming from mental concoction. It can be shown, and especially in light of the modes of material nature. For instance, some people might be super heavily influenced by tamogun, mode of ignorance, and I'm thinking of people who listen to death metal. They have piercings and tattoos. A lot of people like to cut themselves, and a lot of people worship the devil or other kind of dark spirits. But they find some kind of pleasure in this, or they identify that with being happiness. I appreciate everybody's kind attention and not distracting away from what's going on. Anyways, somebody who's more in the mode of passion, they might be hankering after money, prestige, sex, all sorts of things that bring worldly pleasures. And if you take somebody from the mode of passion or the mode of goodness and put them in the other person's shoes, they think it's miserable. We do a certain activity, we have certain hobbies, certain interests, certain likings, and then we look at other people and we think they're crazy. For instance, there's these people who are from a Spanish-speaking country that live next door. They listen to certain kind of music, they talk in a certain kind of way, and then we have other people from a whole different culture, like African-American background. And you can just picture, they're both looking at each other like it's a completely different world. They're doing this thing for happiness. I would never do that. That's ludicrous. And then they're thinking the same thing. And this is going on in the whole world. So everybody's thinking that what they're doing is right, that's the good way, and what everybody else is doing is weird, that's wrong. So we all have that, and we all come from this conditional background, and that's why we're coming to devotional service, to understand Krishna out, how he is, and actually how we can act in a way that's pleasing to Krishna, because if Krishna is pleased, then everybody else derives satisfaction also, because Krishna is the well-wisher of all. He's, what's that shloka? Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram savridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantam richati. Krishna is the well-wisher of everybody. Who else have we ever had in our life that's just a full well-wisher that doesn't want anything from us but to give us the highest thing that we could possibly imagine? where when you're seeing what Krishna is saying in these shlokas that we just read, you're able to act in life being unattached to the fruits of work. Especially growing up in America, we're trained that you need to work and you need to get this result. And if you don't have this result, you're a failure at life. You didn't go to college, you didn't graduate, you're not the manager of the thing, you didn't get married when you were a young age, you still don't have kids, all these different type of things, we think we're failures. But in actuality, the only thing that determines failure and success is if we're taking shelter of Lord Krishna. And to take shelter of Lord Krishna means to? That's there. But who tells us to chant? Take shelter of Guru. So, this is what we're hankering after, is full satisfaction, full freedom from insecurities, freedom from doubts that may arise. So fixed up in our understanding that Krishna is God, He wants the best thing for me, and if I just do the simple thing of serving Him, even if I have a family, and I raise my kids and my family in a way that they're hearing Krishna, we're discussing Krishna, we're chanting Krishna's glories, doing kirtan, or if somebody takes sannyas and they're just fully engaged in traveling around the world preaching. Just because someone does seemingly a lot more activities and does more, doesn't mean somebody has more devotion to Krishna. So what we're trying to develop is this loving devotion to Krishna. And by doing that, our life will be successful, and everybody's life that we come in contact with will actually become successful. So, that being said, I was just thinking about something that was spoken in the class earlier, the point that I like, that we should always be aware of who we're with right now. I always make the point, I could just look out this window, I see so many trees, I hear so many bugs, so many little critters, there's so much living beings just within this small proximity. And then think about all the people within the city, and think about how many of them are actually inquiring into the absolute truth. This Brahma Jigyasa, this is the platform of human life, to actually wonder, what's the point of life? What's the absolute truth? Who is God? Who am I? What's my position in reality to that? But unfortunately, most people are covered over by these modes of material nature, and they can't come to that platform. So, by the causeless mercy of the devotees, other people can get that touch of bhakti in their life, whether it's knowing or unknowing, and then they become connected to Krishna. And when one becomes connected to Krishna, this process automatically starts. Think about how rapid this process is. When you first got the Bhagavad Gita, when you first talked to the devotees, when you first came to the temple, when you're sitting here now, how much rapid progress is made. It's easy to wrestle with the struggle of devotional service. And sometimes it seems like, am I making any advancement at all? Doing the same thing every day. I feel like I'm just spaced out, not really doing so much. I'd like to do more, but there's not a good fit for me, or whatever it may be. But if you look back of where you used to be, so much advancement, so quick. This is the mercy of the Lord, and He's trying to give this mercy to everybody. So, let's not turn away from the mercy. One time I was listening to a lecture by, it wasn't a lecture, but it was Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj, and one of his disciples was asking him, essentially, why don't we get the mercy of Krishna? Do you know his answer? He said, because we're like an owl. We're living like an owl. What does the owl do? During the nighttime, he's active. During the daytime, what does he do? He hides from the sun. Meaning, the mercy of Krishna is always there. Always there. But we don't want it. We hide from it. We want to do our own program. We want to continue navigating through the mind. I do some little activity, or I step down and I see certain amount of rocks in a certain row or a place or some kind of thing, and you're like, yes, today is going to be a good day. This is nice. We find some kind of mental concoction, some kind of satisfaction. But it's all temporary. But when we come to the platform of pure devotional service, it's never temporary. It's always eternal because it's connected to Supreme Eternal. Otherwise, it's fruitless. It's pointless. I mean, we could build such big cities, such elaborate buildings, structures, so many things, but if you look at it, what's the difference between building like a giant skyscraper and a sandcastle on the beach? One's there a little bit longer. What's the difference? You build it and it's destroyed. Matter can't be created or destroyed. It's just changing forms. So we take so much pride in taking something that's not ours and altering it and changing it in a certain way and say, yes, this is mine. I'm the possessor of this. I'm great. But everything will be taken away from us at the time of death. Nothing's ours. This body that we so closely identify with ourselves is not us. It will turn back to the base elements that it is. Imagine if somebody's sitting in this room right now and they leave their body and then there's a lifeless body on the floor. How long does it take until this body actually starts molding and parasites are eating it and it starts breaking down and it creates foul smells? There's forensic specialists, these police officers who do investigations. They could tell exactly by how much time has passed since a body has been killed because of the progress of how many maggots are eating it, to how much it's breaking down. I was walking down the street earlier chanting japa and I saw like a dead possum and I started thinking about this. But the point is, the body is nothing. It's a burden, actually. It's a prison suit, but we become attached to it. And what keeps us in that prison? Does anybody have an idea? That's there. Our desires. And what's the chief desire in the material world? Sex life. These are our shackles. Meaning, we get to the prison bars. We realize we're in shackles. We realize the world's full of suffering. I've had so much misery. Somehow Krishna brought me here. This is so magical. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Krishna. But then, it's not so easy to focus just, okay, the bars are open. Let me go through. We want to turn around and, this person looks so nice. I think it'd work out this time. This sex life, this is our shackles. We're bound up by this. But if we realize we're not the body, then I have nothing to do with the opposite sex. And I remember one time, long time ago, I was distributing books at a university, and I remember looking down, I saw a dragonfly flying around. And for some reason, I had the thought, like, this is a living entity within a body, and I have literally no attraction for it in that kind of way. None. Not at all. But here I am, and I'm in this body, and I can hear that I'm not this body, and we can logically understand that. But if we realize that, then to the opposite sex, we would be the same way of indifferent as we are towards a mosquito, a cockroach, a dragonfly. Completely indifferent, because you realize it's all illusion, that we're not the body. The body's just matter. The living entity within, that's what we're actually attracted to. I mean, think about, the most thing that we're attracted to in that way. I don't want to go in specific details, but the point is, as soon as that soul leaves the body, no longer, no attraction. Yes, Liquid beauty. That's a wonderful story. Which, has everybody heard this story? Dr. Gio said he hasn't heard it. So, I wasn't going to say it, but since Dr. Gio said he's never heard it, I mean, there's a story that's great in this connection. There's one time a male suitor was going around and he saw the most beautiful woman, and he couldn't help himself. He went up to her, said, "My dear lady, please, 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 I don't know how they approached people back in that day, but you can imagine, please, go out on a date with me, please be mine. I want to enjoy with you. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." And she says, "Okay, that's very nice. Please come back in 1 week's time." So this guy, he walks away. He's all happy. "Yes, I'm going to come back in 1 week. This is everything I've been looking for." Jar. He comes back in 1 week, and what does he see, Dr. Gio? She's decrepit and skinny and nasty looking. And he's like, "Who are you? Where's the beautiful young lady that I was speaking to last week? That's who I'm coming to see." And she says, "Oh, that's me. Of course that, no, that can't be you." "Yes, that's me." "What do you mean? That woman was beautiful. She was vibrant. She was young. You're none of those things." "I'm appalled." And she said, what did she say? She said, "Oh, you're attracted to my beauty. I'll show you where my beauty is." So she brings him inside. And she saved all of her beauty in all these vats, all these vessels. So all week long she was taking purgatives. You know what a purgative does, right? What does it make you do? Yes. She filled up all these vats, all these tubs with all of her vomit and all of her excrement, all these things that come out the body that we're so attracted to, that we think is so nice. Stored them all in these jars. Just imagine how when she took them over there and opened up the jar, how that might have smelled. And she said, "This, my dear sir, this is what you're attracted to. This is what we're attracted to." And we can hear this, and still we don't want to accept it. Is it just me? I don't think so. Otherwise, why would the Srimad Bhagavatam give so many stories of why this is such an impediment in our spiritual life? The Srimad Bhagavatam describes stories of different yogis and sages that are captivated by these beautiful women, but the same thing goes for women. They're attracted to men, and they become distracted from the essence of life also. So it's not a one-way street. We have to realize our position and see how I can actually work within the guidelines of what Krishna provides, so I can make rapid spiritual advancement, to give up this conditioned mindset of trying to enjoy. I mean, even Indra, he was cursed. He took the birth of a hog. He's running around as a hog. He has a whole family, little baby hogs, and they have their little hog home, and everything. So nice. And then all the demigods come, and they come to find him, and they say, "Okay, we need you back in your post. There's a lot going on in the grand scheme of the universe. Indra's a very powerful person." He says, No, I'm fine here. I get to eat all this stool. It's everywhere. It's tasty. It's great. I have my little pig family. They snort and make little weird noises. This is what happens. We become conditioned to our platform in life, and we don't want to give it up. We grow up with some kind of suffering, some kind of thing that happens, some conditioning that's placed upon us, and we become attached to that. So then Krishna, through the mercy of his devotees and himself, are coming and showing us, look, give up all these things and just render devotional service. So if we take to this, it's everything that we're looking for. But if not, we'll just be constantly swaying back and forth, thinking that we're the doer and we're free, but we're actually just being controlled and manipulated by the modes of material nature, like this first verse we read. So, thank you everybody for patiently hearing with your full attention. Does anybody have any comments or questions or reflections? Yes, Bhakta Avatar Prabhu.
I'm sorry, this is kind of a stupid question, but I've heard the story of Jada Bharat many times in the deer, and I've always just wondered, so what do I do if I see a drowning baby deer?
It's a very good question. I meant to say something about this, because a lot of people are kind-hearted, especially devotees. And you could answer a few different ways, because, for instance, in the Bhagavatam, I know there's a shloka where it says, I think it's Narada Muni talking about the duties of the different ashrams, the Varna ashram, and he's talking about Grihastha. Grihastha has a duty to take care of, if there's a living entity in my house, I have the duty to take care of it. And then the mention is even that a snake. But then, there's another verse in the Bhagavatam where it says, a sadhu delights at killing a snake. So there's different ways to look at it, but what comes to my mind is that, one time I was reading, I was with Maharaj, we were reading this, I'll Build You a Temple, Maharaj's book. And I forgot why it came up, but basically the question was what if there's a drowning person? Somebody asked Prabhupada, what do we do? Same thing, essentially. And Prabhupada says the devotee does not get entangled in other living entities' karma. Because the devotee will see that this is just karma enacting, that this is a conditioned soul, that they're being influxed by the modes of material nature. But, you know what he went on to say? He said, but if there's a crowd of people watching and seeing this, and you're a respected person within society, and they see you just sit there and just kind of shrug it off, they might not be able to they won't be able to understand the mentality. So then he said the devotee can act and do that, because then people will see what's wow, that devotee is really helpful. Wow, these devotees are amazing. So the principle is to accept whatever is most favorable for Krishna. You could speak a lot more on that, because it's hard to see that and just walk away. But when you understand this pastime and the significance of it, it becomes easy. Because you realize that we're all suffering. Just because this person right now is this animal is temporary suffering in this present condition, we're all suffering constantly. Death. Something happens and this little animal or critter gets sick, and then you could see death there with it then, Because it becomes visible. Oh, there's disease, there's distraught, But that's happening to all of us at every second. Or we ignore it. Hope that helps. Any other thoughts, comments? Ananda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I'll just make a quick comment, Prabhu, in regards to Jada Bharat's fall down. He fell down from the platform of Bhava, and it was arranged by Krishna to teach us that without devotee association, even on the level of Bhava, one can fall down. And his fall down was not a gross fall down, because he fell down back to his original nature, which is as a king. He's, like you mentioned, they're supposed to be protectors of everyone. So he naturally felt compassionate again for other living entities. So in the kingdom of a king, no one suffers unnecessarily. So he fell down to that mundane pious platform. It wasn't into extreme gross sense gratification like we would fall down into, but he fell down into that his nature is like that, actually, as a king, to be protective of others. So that's one point. But it's to illustrate, and also the point is that he gave up those responsibility as a king to engage in spiritual activities when it's exclusively focusing on Krishna. It's a fall down from that perspective, but still it's a fall down. So just keep those points in mind. Hare Krishna.
Anything else, devotees? Yes, Bhakti Jacob Prabhu. This will be the last thing. Unless Bhakti Gio has something good for us.
Hare Krishna, thanks for your nice class. I just have a reflection that I really liked that you said that we can read Shastra in order to correct or to stop justifying our own wrong actions. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, and actually, sometimes it might be quite difficult to do that on our own. This is why we need the association of devotees, because the sadhus can cut through our ignorance. Because we could read a book and see it in one way or the other, but then when you're face to face with a person and they're sharing things from their own personal experience and then backing up the Shastra, it demolishes our whole material contaminations. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.